You cannot invade the mainland United States. There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass. That was Gordon W. Prange, U.S. Army historian to General MacArthur. Note right away that this is often misattributed to Admiral Yamamoto from the Imperial Japanese Navy. But apparently that is not the case. Yamamoto did not say that. Whoever said it, there's some thought behind it now, isn't there? So today we'll talk about that rifle behind every blade of grass. We'll talk about the strategic perspective of the AR-15 rifle. Now, when we discuss this, I'm not going to delve into the threats. The threats themselves can come from a myriad of places, not the least of which would be internal government threat. Let's say, we divide into a civil war, as we've done twice in our history. It might be the opposite side. It's a state or a private militia that poses an internal threat. It might be an external threat. It might be a threat from an invading, nation-state military. Or it might be a temporary or permanent invasion from a non-state actor. Let's say the crime cartels of Mexico, right? Invade the southern United States. Whatever hypothetical situation you can come up with, the threat isn't as important in specifics as it is in this discussion when we're looking at part of the solution when we come back. I'm Dr. Christopher Larsen, a veteran of the U.S. Army Infantry, founder of One Shepherd Leadership Institute, and author of Small Unit Tactical Doctrine. Forbes magazine in March of 2021 had the following headline: U.S. has at least 20 million assault rifles. Now, that's a bit problematic because, of course, what's an assault rifle, right? In military parlance, an assault rifle is a select fire weapon system. That is, the capability of producing something akin to full auto fires. And to that point, the United States registers something like 600,000 full auto firearms. And those are in, as I understand it, transferable firearms. However, they also include a full auto pistol, submachine gun, rifle, as well as plenty of crew-served machine gun. In addition to those 600,000, I looked up estimates. Very, very hard to get concrete numbers, but there are generally agreed upon estimates, and it goes something like this: 8 million AR-15 series of all calibers and types, 4 million Mini 14 series of all calibers and types. About 3 million Kalashnikov series of all different calibers are owned by Americans, as well as another 3 million Simonov series. That would be your SKSs. And then, in addition to that, there would be about 2 million, we might call them the old style battle rifles, 308, 7.62 by 51 millimeter battle rifles. These include your M14, your FAL, your G3, those sort of things. And then another 2 million everything else. And everything else is just a ginormous myriad of firearms, from Fabrique Nationale to Steyr to Galil and Valmet, Beretta to Daewoo, and U.S. producers from Bushmaster to Keltec. These include rifles and carbines and bullpups and SMGs and everything else that might be called an assault weapon. Anyway, it is a military-style firearm that is certainly at least capable of semi-automatic fire. That's about 22 million. And of that 22 million that we will say assault style or military style firearms, more than a third are estimated to be AR-15s and some variant of the AR-15. Well, why is the AR-15 so remarkably popular? Well, let me introduce a new word to your vocabulary. It certainly was to mine, a calcar. I like this word. Calcar is a noun, and it means a small spur-like projection, typically from a body. And I like that because I remember back in the days of the Army and basic training when we were learning to carry our rifles everywhere, right? Carry our weapons everywhere we went. We slept with them, we marched with them, we ate with them. And if you ever had the unpleasant experience of walking away from your firearm, usually a drill sergeant would scream at you to raise your arms, and you would raise your arms way out to the side, and they'd say, "Is one arm longer than the other?" No, they look about the same. That's right, because the firearm, back in the day, the M16A1, was seen as an extension of your body, of an arm, like a CALCAR. Well, CALCAR, as spelled as it sounds, C-A-L-C-A-R, is a pretty good acronym or mnemonic device to remember why, the 6 reasons why the AR-15 has become so incredibly prolific. Let's talk about that a little bit. First is convenience. Convenience, availability, lethality, customizability, accuracy, and reliability, right? So convenience, C, CALCAR. Well, it is lightweight and has a very low recoil, and they're perfect in that regard for every shooter. Quite literally men and women from ages 5 up to 95. It's a pretty comfortable firearm to shoot in terms of rifles for everyone. Availability, A. Countless manufacturers, you couldn't shake a stick at them and hit all of them, and it's priced for every single budget. If you want a bottom-of-the-line $450 carbine, it's out there for you. If you want top-of-the-line $2,500 marksman rifle, it's out there for you. So race guns and sporting guns and hunting guns, as well as tactical guns and self-defense guns. So it's available in every conceivable market. Lethal. Lethality, 5.56 millimeter, is just powerful enough for self-defense. Contrary to what is often reported as a high-power rifle, it does break sound barrier, and it is, I think, on the bottom end of high-power rifles. I think we'd have to agree with that, but it's far, far from the most powerful. It's somewhat anemic, but powerful enough. Customizable. It has easy accessories to fit everyone's preferences, and again, this includes changing calibers, changing lengths of barrels and stocks, and making it smaller and more compact, going to, you know, great big large versions. So very, very customizable. It's been called the American man's Barbie doll because it is so accessorizable. It's accurate. It dominates sporting competition circuits for exactly this reason. It's remarkably accurate. And finally, it's reliable, and that is that it served the United States military and police for 63 years now, a whopping 63 years. So there you go. Why is it so popular? Because it excels in all of these areas, these 6 areas: convenience, availability, lethality, customizability, accuracy, and reliability. And that's kind of a more tactical look at why this firearm has been so incredibly popular for more than 6 decades. Let's take a more strategic look, right? Because regardless of who said, oh, you know, there's a rifle behind every blade of grass, there is a very serious thought to it. Look, the United States numbers in population over the 300 million mark. It's estimated that we have well more than that in terms of firearms. We have more firearms in this country than we have human beings. And you can ask yourself, okay, but to what end? To what avail, right? So the question there that we're begging is, what if the population is unarmed? What if it's just not armed, or it's insufficiently armed? And I think we can take a look at several fairly recent, starting in the last 25 years or so. We can look at several different key incidents and we can explore that. Let's start with February in 1997 in North Hollywood, California, the infamous North Hollywood shootout. There were 2 heavily armed bank robbers wearing body armor that engaged dozens of police officers in a 44-minute gun battle. And if you know anything about a gun battle, 44 minutes is a lifetime. The police officers were insufficiently armed with handguns and ultimately had to seek rifles from local gun shops in order to engage these 2 robbers. Both the robbers were eventually killed after they had wounded 12 officers and 8 civilians. And so insufficiently armed police officers up against 2 men with assault rifles. You see the imbalance there. But let's jump forward, a good 10 years or more to November 2008 in Mumbai, India. 10 terrorists armed with rifles and hand grenades attacked the city of Mumbai for 4 days. Indian civilians were unarmed and police were insufficiently armed. Indian military response resulted in the killing of 9 terrorists and the capture of 1, but 174 lives were lost, and that includes 20 police officers, and another 300 plus people were wounded. When you see a population that is either unarmed, which mostly this is unarmed. There were some security forces with firearms, but very, very insufficiently armed. And they were devastated in a 4-day attack by just 10 people. Now, this doesn't only happen in far-off places like Mumbai, India, which in all rights is a very modern city. We can also see this in November 2015 in Paris, France. Just three terrorists, armed with rifles and homemade grenades, conducted a 2-day attack at multiple sites across Paris. French civilians were unarmed, and the police were again insufficiently armed. Better armed security forces eventually contained and killed all 3 terrorists. However, 130 people were killed, including multiple police officers in that tally, and more than 350 people were wounded. We can look at the United States, we can look at incidents in India, we can look at incidents in Europe, in Paris, and time again we can see what devastation can be wrought by 2 to 10 people with firearms. You compare that to other incidents here in the United States where a good guy with a firearm comes and puts an end to it. And so there you go. That's the next logical question, right? Okay. What if they are sufficiently armed? Let's start looking at some recent incidents that have made headline news here in the United States. In March 2017 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a 23-year-old man was awakened from his nap to find 3 armed masked teenagers in the process of breaking into his home. The young man retrieved his AR-15, shooting and killing all 3 home invaders. The homeowner, the young man's father, was sleeping upstairs in the bedroom at the time of the invasion. Police have determined that the shooting was self-defense. In November 2017, Sutherland Springs, Texas, a neighbor was woken from his morning sleep by gunfire from the direction of a church. With his AR-15 in hand, he ran barefoot to his truck. The neighbor drove to the scene of a terrible carnage where a gunman had just murdered 26 people and wounded 20 more in a local church. The neighbor fired at the gunman, wounding him. When the gunman got in his car and drove away, the neighbor gave chase in his truck, and ultimately the gunman crashed and took his own life. May 2019, Tallahassee, Florida. 4 armed men attempted to invade the home of a local resident, but when their intended victim armed himself with an AR-15, a battle ensued. In just seconds, 2 of the attackers were wounded. All 4 criminals made a hasty escape, but police arrested the 4 later and charges were filed. The shooting was again declared self-defense. June 2019, Summerfield, Florida. A 61-year-old disabled man fought off 4 home invaders. The homeowner heard someone breaking into his home. He retrieved an AR-15 and engaged a masked man who was armed with a handgun, then engaged a masked man armed with a shotgun. Both invaders died. Police arrested 2 more. The homeowner was wounded, but in stable condition and recovered. Police said the incident was self-defense. October 2019 in Lithia, Florida. A pregnant woman engaged 2 armed home invaders as they violently attacked her husband. She killed one with an AR-15 and the other ran off. The couple's 11-year-old daughter was home at the time of the attack. No charges were filed in what police described as an incident of self-defense. August 2020, Kenosha, Wisconsin. A young man was attacked by multiple armed men during a riot. After the young man doused a dumpster fire that rioters were pushing into a local business, he was targeted. He was threatened, chased, and violently attacked. He defended himself with an AR-15, killing 2 and wounding a 3rd attacker. Here again, this went to trial, and as many of you already know, he was found not guilty, and it was a case, again, of self-defense. So we're looking at all of these as these incidents where people are protecting themselves with an AR-15. And as previously discussed, that AR-15 brings all of these incredible assets, or it has its own advantage in a gunfight. In just about every one of these incidents, you'll see that the intended victim is outnumbered 2, 3, or 4 to 1, sometimes more. And in each case, the criminals are armed with weapons that are easily concealed, that is knives, bludgeoning tools, and handguns. The victim, well, I was going to say equalizes the fight by introducing an AR-15 into the battle, but in fact, the battle becomes extremely lopsided in every single case. So you can see the value of the AR-15 in this kind of self-defense battle. It happens time and time again, and I've cherry-picked some of the most prominent, headline news. There's one case after another that far outnumber the few that I've shared with you. Okay, so we've looked at the AR-15 from its convenience, and we've looked at it from a tactical perspective, from self-defense in crime, as well as from terrorist attacks on a larger scale. And so clearly being armed, and armed credibly with a viable instrument, allows you to form together in terms of self-defense, be it just one person defending themselves, their family, their loved ones, or coming together as a community. And so that's the next question is, then fine, if these are the tactical and operational values, what's the strategic value of the militia? And you commonly hear, a militia cannot defeat a professional army. That is correct. As a general rule of thumb. I know there's plenty of people say, wait a minute, it's happened in history. Yes, but very rarely. And even in those cases, that's not true. The militia in each case wound up with other help, outside help that came to their aid. So you could say that in whole, and it's not my point to argue this, that in whole it is true. In general, it is correct. And my counter to that is rarely ever is it the mission of a militia to deal a knockout blow to a professional enemy army. That's just not the purpose of a militia. A militia is better suited to shaping operations that compel an enemy to disperse its combat power across a greater area, a larger territory, thereby weakening its ability to bring combat power to bear at different points. The militia mission then would include reconnaissance, surveillance, and logistics overwhelmingly, right? The collection and passing of information and logistical supplies. But it may also include direct action raids and ambushes, and this is frequently the case. In order to achieve such missions, the militiamen must be adequately armed. Now look at CalCAR again. Convenience, availability, lethality, customizability, accuracy, reliability. Convenience. Its lightweight and low recoil are suitable to all warriors of all statures and genders. Availability. Well, there are 8 million manufactured to date. AR-15s are 8 million available in the United States today. Lethality. 5.56 is a powerful enough for combat and certainly lethal to humans. Customizable to the mission. Remember I just said 5.56 is powerful enough? If you want to go to a smaller cartridge, let's say a 45 caliber pistol cartridge or 9mm, you can because it's customizable. If you want to go larger to 6mm ARC, 6.5mm Grendel, a 6.8 SPC, or even if you wish to change out there are variants of the AR series that are made in 308, 762x51, as well as 762x39. So you really are very customizable for just about any mission. Accuracy it's accurate enough for any combat role, and as a matter of fact, it's more accurate than that. It's accurate enough to do competition. Reliability. Yes, it's reliable because it has been in American service for 63 years and is incredibly maintainable. The American militia did not win the American Revolutionary War for Independence, by the way. But America's professional standing army could not have won that on its own. If there had been no militia that forced the British to disperse their combat power across all 13 colonies, then the British could have brought together their combat power at any single point to defeat the federal standing military. Now, this is generally agreed upon wisdom across most historians. I think we'll agree with that. That was the value, the strategic value of the militia, was that it tied down the enemy in so many different places, because it offered logistics, intelligence, surveillance, and from time to time raids and ambushes as well, direct action combat as well. So this necessitated that the British covered down in all of these various territories and thereby split their forces and disperse their combat power. That's all the way back then, and we've seen the militia used several times since then. And then you're going to say, well, okay, if that's the case, how do we credibly arm the American militiaman and the American citizen? And the answer is that the AR-15 has been America's battle rifle for 63 years. That's the strategic value.